Roland Willits, Old Men Stories. Today we're going to look at heritage.
They're both showing. We're going. You know what our subject's about today? Heritage.
Heritage?
Heritage, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
Whose?
anyone's, ours, yours, mine. It's heritage.
Oh,
It's a story about our heritage.
All right.
And I know you must have some Indian blood because, you know, when I was young, you say you're wild as an Indian. Well, you must have some Indian blood.
I didn't say that. I didn't know you when you were young. My mother always insisted that my dad had Cherokee Indian. However, it was Choctaw, and it wasn't very much. In fact, it was so little that I don't even think my grandparents knew it. But Mother always insisted, because my dad was, he had the features of an American Indian. And my grandfather had the ways of an American Indian. And he also had the sense of humor. I told you about that in a previous time when he had me chasing birds with a salt shaker. But I'm very, very, very proud of my base, of the base that I stand on, the shoulders that I stand on. I didn't know my great-grandparents, I don't know much about them, but apparently they came to this country from Ireland and Germany, and my grandparents on my father's side were married in the territory of New Mexico. And I looked up my grandpa on the net and went back to the 1909 census, and he and my grandmother were there with their first child, which was my Aunt Opal. And she just died about 7 or 8 years ago.
Short time.
Grandma and Grandpa were married on my dad's side. Grandma and Grandpa were married forever. And when Grandma died first, and my grandpa wouldn't have anything to do with anyone else, because my grandmother was literally a saint. And I mean that in the most wonderful way. She truly was a saint. She birthed 11 kids and raised 9. And when we went back to Causey, I showed Roland the house that Grandpa built for Grandma. It was just a one-room log cabin, and there were no logs, so Grandpa had to ship them in and then drive them in by wagon, and he built that house for her, and it's still standing, or it was when we were there a few years ago. My mother's side of the family were very raucous. My grandfather was, when he died, was a bus driver in Abilene, Texas, and before that he was a cowboy who broke horses for ranchers. Excuse me. Whew. And the one thing I remember about their relationship was they really loved one another. They were always happy. My grandpa was this wonderful, full of laughter. He had a laugh that would just shake the room, and of course, I being the first grandchild was his adored one. He used to set me on his knee and tell me stories in front of the fireplace, and that was so wonderful to me. And we were gone for a couple of years. We came back, and I asked Grandpa, I said, Grandpa, why did you shrink the fireplace? It used to be bigger. Of course, now I realize that I had gotten bigger and it just appeared smaller, but that's how smart I was. And my grandmother used to make banana cakes. And there were 6-layer banana cakes. And she cooked red beans and ham really, really well. Those are the things I remember about Grandma. She had a very coarse voice. The tone was low and a little bit grating, but she was full of love. That's my heritage that I remember.
Cool.
Yep. What about you?
Well, in a manger.
I'm gonna hit him. Everybody turn your eyes away because I don't want you to see the blood. So.
My family is the same, follows a similar path. You know, you've been, your family was there in the States as settlers and way back into the 17th, 18th century.
That was our grandparents.
Yeah, I mean, but our heritage was.
Right.
Our heritage was. Yeah, and I was the same way. My dad's family were Quakers. And we sort of followed them, you know, like you could get the heritage, you could follow one. My grandmother was Irish, and my grandfather, he was, I don't know, just Quaker, I don't know, British, probably English or Welsh or something like that.
Well, somebody was French.
That was my mother's side.
Oh, okay.
That was my mother's side. And it's funny because you follow the little lines, and their name were Drury and the Willits.
Right.
Well, it's really funny because you'd see a Drury marrying a Willits, and about two generations next, you'd see a Drury marrying a Willits.
Ah,
and
that explains it.
and you know, we're up in northern Minnesota, and they have a city called Willits.
In California.
In California, up in Northern California, and about 40 miles from there, there's a burg or another area called Drury. So the Drury and the Willits sort of went all across the country with following or in the same area, and they were of Quaker origin, like as I said before. And on my mother's side, they were really unusual because they were up in northern Minnesota, and they have a whole clan up there, a whole group of Germans up here. And while we're up there right now, this area, they have a whole area of Germans, and they have a whole area of French. And they met each
They have
other.
that in Europe.
They met. They met each other, and this was right during World War I between the Germans and the French. Oh,
poopy.
and they had these battles going on here. You know, I mean, I don't know how they got into guns, but they were really
They weren't physical.
German. Yeah, they weren't physical. But when the two married, they really had a lot of controversy. They were in deep doo-doo with both families. But and they died young. They died in their 40s. They died really young.
They had a hard life.
They had a really, really hard life.
The whole family, both sides, disowned them because they married one another.
That's right. That's
At
right.
least that's what Ma said.
That's right. That's right. And it was a tough life. They're up by Rosewood, right up by the Canadian border, and north of here, and you know how short the summers are here.
Yes.
Yeah, you go 300 miles further north, and they're shorter still. And so you had extremely short seasons and a lot of winter. And I remember, and I don't know if I told another story, Ma would talk about, you could tell how cold it was because the nails coming through the roof, because there was no insulation, would turn different color blues.
Yep.
Oh, that was a rough life. But they absolutely loved each other. And my mom was, one of her really, really sad things was saying, they took Ma and Dad and separated them when they were getting real sick. And she thought that was one of the hardest things that ever happened to her. But,
You just started whispering.
did I?
Yes.
Oh, I was telling something very quiet. But guess what? I have a microphone right next to my little lips.
Okay, well, I have my ear right next there and I didn't hear you.
Oh, the mic got it.
Okay.
Meet Mike.
Hi, Mike. That's sort of like good night, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie. Okay. Well, our heritages were wonderful, and I'm just absolutely thrilled with mine, and I think every person in the world, and I love to hear about heritage and where they come from. They're all wonderful. You gotta get. We go back 4 billion years, but I don't remember those relatives.
I thought you said in the manger.
Oh, that's a little
That's
before that.
2000.
A little before that.
Okay.
Well, are you ready to say
Good night, Gracie. Ha!
See you all.
Bye.
Old men stories, returning home and knowing a little more about our heritage.